city of Townsville. I've always wanted to say that. I didn't immediately like or get the Powerpuff Girls when I first saw it. I was there for the first Powerpuff Girls short on the Cartoon Show, and I had a similar reaction to a lot of people. What's with these big-eyed, fingerless little girls flying around, fighting a hick with a shotgun, and is the big conflict of this entire cartoon really that the blue one got one of her pigtails turned into a chicken leg? What? But like seeing a person setting himself on fire, I just couldn't turn away. There was something really unique about the overall package of this thing. The animation and character design seemed really simple, but there was so much energy to it. It was wild and bizarre, and it embraced that. Whoever made this thing and put together a really stupid cartoon and knew it was stupid, and that was the idea. Stupid doesn't have to be vulgar or offensive. Sometimes stupid is really, really fun. And that's what the Powerpuff Girls is for the most part. Big, loud, high-octane, totally out there, stupid fun. Now don't get me wrong, there's definitely a lot of clever there too. I wouldn't call Powerpuff Girls brainless. It's definitely got its social commentary, it's well-placed and often subtle cultural references, and fantastic comedic timing with its visual comedy. But let's face it, the big joke is, cute little girls fighting giant monsters is funny. If you ask Craig McCracken what his show is about, he won't get all stuffy and give some long-winded scholarly explanation about all the deep-seated socially relevant themes in his cartoon show. He'll tell you it's about three little girls who fight giant monsters, and that because they look cute and innocent and they're kindergartners, the contrast between the scary villains and monsters make it funny. At least that's what he said in the documentary on the DVD series box set. I've said this before, there's a difference between an animated series and a cartoon, and this is certainly a cartoon. And there's gotta be room for both, because sometimes I want the serious, thought-provoking entertainment of Batman the Animated Series, and sometimes I just want something goofy that makes me laugh. And most episodes of Powerpuff Girls have at least one moment that makes me laugh, except for the occasional ultra-gross episodes, but thankfully those are few and far between. Looking back on it now, I think for me, Powerpuff Girls represents everything I loved about 90s culture. It's bold, it's original, it's shameless, it has an edge to it, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's highly experimental. There was a lot of censoring going on in American animation around that time. Spider-Man really suffered from it, as an example. But Cartoon Network gave McCracken a lot of leeway. And we got a really unique cartoon because of that, just like Dexter's Lab before it, which McCracken worked on for 4 years before Powerpuff Girls finally went to series. By the way, the concept originally came from a short film he did in animation school in '93 called Whoop-Ass Girls, and that title was changed for obvious reasons by the time Cartoon Network let him adapt it into a new short for the Cartoon Show. Naturally, it's a really high-concept series, so the success of each episode has to be measured at least somewhat by how good the idea is, and then how well it's executed. And the 10 best Powerpuff episodes should probably be some of the funnier shows, since that was, the point. Comedy is, of course, pretty subjective, so my top 10 are likely to be very different from somebody else's. There were a lot of episodes, and while it has a certain formula to it, some are funny for different reasons, and funny for different people. Like, again, the gross ones, such as Paste Makes Waste and Wreaking Havoc, which aren't funny to me at all. I should also point out that the majority of Powerpuff episodes were 2 11-minute cartoons packaged together for a full 22-minute show. But I'll be counting the 11-minute cartoons as separate episodes, since which 2 episodes were shown together was simply decided by production order and nothing else. For instance, Insecticide and Powerpuff Bluff are considered an episode, but they have nothing to do with each other. There are some full 22-minute shows on this list, and finally, most of my favorites come from the first 3 seasons. Craig McCracken wasn't heading the show for the last couple seasons, and for me, they're just not quite up to the same caliber. But a lot of those are still pretty awesome, as I've come to realize finally watching the rest as I've been preparing for this video, but none of them quite knocked anything off that I already had in my best of list. This isn't the kind of show that warrants my usual brand of analysis, so a lot of this is likely to just be me saying, hey, you remember the part where this awesome thing happens? Hey, you remember the time we were in the closet remembering stuff? Feel free to skip around, too. So now, here are my personal top 10 Powerpuff Girls episodes. Go Monkey Go! Number 10, the Powerpuff Girls' best rainy day adventure ever. Even though the girls are constantly fighting crime, they're still kindergarten kids, and somehow they haven't lost their childlike sensibilities. This episode portrays them like real kindergartners. They have really active imaginations, and they can make a huge adventure out of very little up in their bedroom on a rainy day when there's no crime to fight. Since they can't be Powerpuff Girls for real outside, they decide to play the Powerpuff Girls inside, acting out a whole episode on their own, and it's hilarious. They do a lot of stuff real siblings do when they're playing together, and that's what makes it so funny. It's pretend so they can't be their real selves. Buttercup wants to be Blossom, but Blossom says she has to be Bubbles because there are only 3 of them, and if they're each other, Bubbles will be Bubbles, and that just can't happen. So they argue about who has to be Bubbles, which of course makes Bubbles cry. So the professor comes in to break up the fighting at about the moment a parent would in this situation, and he ends up playing Bubbles. I think the funniest scene is when Bubbles, pretending to be the mayor, calls the mayor as if he's a Powerpuff Girl, and since he's an idiot, he thinks he is a Powerpuff Girl, and he jumps out the window and lands in the mud. I should probably say again that this show isn't for everyone, but yeah, I think that's really funny. In their make-believe scenario, it's Mojo Jojo who's behind the giant alligator, played by Blossom with a bucket on her head, who does a really funny Mojo impression. She hides and the others have to find her, but after a while, Bubbles and Buttercup just give up because they're modern kids with really short attention spans. And since they have such short attention spans, what do they give up playing make-believe for? Playing video games, of course. So Blossom, as Mojo, makes her new evil plan to take the cartridge out of the system while they're playing, and they have a good time playing make-believe again. There's not much of a conflict to this story, obviously. It's pretty much the audience watching kids pretending to do the thing they do in real life for real, which surprisingly has quite a lot of comedy mileage. But the whole thing's about the payoff at the end, where the sun comes back up, and suddenly there's a real giant alligator summoned by Mojo Jojo, and the girls are all upset because they have to go out and fight for real. So many people are like that, too. Kids and adults not wanting to do anything they have an obligation to do because that's work, even if in another context it would feel more like play. Number 9, Mime for a Change. This one starts with a nod to classic supervillain origin stories, where one fatal accident transforms a normal person into a horrible monster. It's taken to an absurd extreme here by having a happy clown who just wants to make kids happy get covered in bleach and turn into a mime who wants to take all the color and sound away from everyone and make them miserable. This episode has some of the most ridiculous ideas in the whole show. Bleach turns clowns into mimes who steal color, and overly peppy pop music returns all the color. It's a great episode for Bubbles, whose favorite thing to do is color, and seeing the city in black and white drives her insane, to the point where she flies everywhere, frantically trying to restore all the color with crayons. She's left all alone when Mr. Mime gets to the other girls and takes their color, and it's her idea to bring the town back to life with a song called Love Makes the World Go Round. It's a really catchy song, over the top and super gushy, and hearing the girls singing in 3-part harmony cracks me up every time. And just when you think this one has a really sappy ending, some really vague and mushy moral about love conquering all, the Powerpuff Girls mercilessly throw the restored and happy Rainbow the Clown in jail for everything Mr. Mime did, without even considering that maybe he had no control over his actions. Man, no Smallville, I'm not myself excuse for him. I love how subverted that ending is. It's like it's telling the audience, remember what show you're watching? Powerpuff Girls haven't hit anything yet. Maybe not the best message for impressionable kids, but that's the joke. Hopefully kids don't read too much into silly cartoons. Number 8, just another Manic Mojo. Mojo Jojo is the perfect cartoon villain because he can be really menacing or really silly depending on what an episode calls for. There are a lot of levels to his comedy. Sometimes we're laughing at him because embarrassing things happen to him, or we're laughing at him because his evil plans are so preposterous, and he's a lot of fun to watch because he just loves his job of trying to take over the world so much. Here, we get both. It's kind of a day-in-the-life sort of show, where we see Mojo start his day and treat every minute problem with the same bravado and melodrama he does when he's thwarted by the Powerpuff Girls. Every time anything goes remotely wrong for him, he says curses, like when he only has one egg left to make breakfast with. For a nutritious breakfast, 2 is the minimum requirement, and I have but 1, which is 1 shy of 2, and it is 2 that I need. Curses. The mundane can be really funny, especially the more extreme your character's reaction is to it, and that gag is used over and over to great effect here. My favorite moment is when Mojo, long-winded as always, menacingly asks a grocery store clerk where the eggs are. He says aisle 3, and he embarrassingly realizes he's standing right next to it. He keeps playing up his villain persona, but it seems like no one takes him seriously if he's not running around in a giant robot trying to destroy the city at every moment. There are kids playing in his moat. He stands at a crosswalk with a bunch of irritating people doing little aggravating things while he waits for the light to change. And then the Powerpuff Girls crash a baseball through his window and nonchalantly knock on the door of their arch enemy to get their ball back, like he's their next door neighbor or something. Mojo decides to use this opportunity to destroy them with his giant Destructo Powerpuffo Ray, pretending to look for the ball so he can set them up right where he wants them. But of course he stands in the way of his own ray gun, trying to stop Bubbles from breaking a priceless vase. He gives him the ball back, and then the greatest insult. The next day, the newspaper declares that Mojo Jojo has saved the day. All the best Mojo gags are rolled into one episode here, all about the monotony of his kinda sad life. And for some reason, I thought it was even funnier after I saw the Jack Nicholson movie about Schmidt. I don't really know why. Number 7, Speed Demon. Him is the strangest of the Powerpuff villains and one of the most distinct. He seems to be all-powerful, has no real defined power set, looks like the devil, and according to McCracken, originally the idea was that he would be the actual devil, and he's a cross-dresser who looks a lot like the Blue Meanies from Yellow Submarine. Speed Demon is, I think, his best episode, and one of the most twisted of the whole series, in which the girls learn to be more responsible with their powers as they carelessly go faster than the speed of light, racing home after school, and wind up traveling 50 years in the future, in one of the coolest animated sequences in the whole show. And I think it's neat that later the movie would pick up on that theme of the girls not realizing just how powerful they are and what damage they can do, and building that into their origin. They travel to a post-apocalyptic future they weren't around to prevent, in which him has taken over everything. It spoofs a lot of other sci-fi properties that have done these horrible future scenarios like Terminator without robots. Townsville is a horrible wasteland, and the girls encounter some genuinely creepy stuff, my favorite being the elderly professor trying repeatedly to recreate the Powerpuff Girls. Him is in very little of the episode, but he has a lot of presence, and I love it when he says that while they were gone, the whole world went to heck. I also like his line about how easy it was to take over, because it's really consistent with other events in the show. It seems like Townsville has become a place that completely relies on the Powerpuff Girls, because the citizens have become complacent and can't do anything for themselves, like we see in Too Poop to Puff, which almost made this list. And so many monsters attack Townsville because, at least according to the one in Super Zeros, fighting the girls is a rite of passage for monsters on Monster Isle. So part of the gag is that the girls have created a bizarre social institution that revolves around them, where if they leave for any time at all, their whole city might be doomed. And so, though excited about going on vacation and getting away from crime fighting at the beginning of the episode, they take this Ghost of Christmas Future experience to heart and cancel their trip, which is actually kind of sad. A lot of dark humor in this episode. Number 6, Powerpuff. Powerpuff is one of the full 22-minute episodes from Season 3, and it's one of the best examples of visual storytelling without a lot of needless dialogue to tell us what's on the screen. By the way, the narrator is one of the funnier gimmicks in the show because he never ever tells you anything you need to know, spoofing the narrator from the 60s Batman series. He opens every episode with, "The City of Townsville," or some variation on it, closes every episode with, "And now the day is saved, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls," or some variation on that, and in between, mostly just states the obvious and provides lots and lots of puns. And the show generally has such a good grasp on traditional cartoon storytelling that the last thing it needs is a narrator. It wouldn't even have to have dialogue if it didn't want to. The best scene in the Powerpuff Girls movie is the long action sequence of the girls destroying Townsville playing tag, and that has no dialogue at all. This one opens with examples of the professor and the girls trying to have fun together, only to be interrupted by a crisis the girls have to deal with. This gives us one of the funniest moments where the professor takes the girls to see Movie Puppet Pals in Movie Puppet Pals the movie in 3D, the Puppet Pals being the popular kids show from Dexter's Lab, and when a monster pops out of the screen, the audience applauds until one of them gets eaten. So to solve the problem of limited family time, the professor builds himself a super suit so he can fight with the girls, and he calls himself Power Prof. It goes well, at first, until the professor starts embarrassing the girls by trying to talk hip, like when he says, "Let's get jiggly with it," and telling unflattering stories to people when they're fighting crime. He mentions that Bubbles used to have a bedwetting problem, and she puts a bag over her head. I love that this show goes that far. Somebody gets so embarrassed, they literally put a paper bag over their head. And I love that he makes them wear knee and elbow pads. So the girls devise a plan to wear the professor out and give up crime fighting by arranging for him to fight Mojo, who he manages to defeat single-handedly, but does indeed decide he's too old for all this. And that scene has one of my all-time favorite Mojo Jojo lines. "You will pay for your use of inappropriate dialogue." It's a really charming episode because, as absent-minded as the professor is, I like him and the way he interacts with the girls, and even in the context of an absurd cartoon, it is a little sad to see a dad who can't figure out how to spend more time with his kids. It's also cool how that's an inverted problem. Usually it's the parent who doesn't have time for his kids, not the other way around. Number 5, Super Zeros. Powerpuff Girls is obviously superhero parody, but that's not necessarily the primary reason a lot of people tuned in, and it doesn't have as many direct and blatant knockoffs of mainstream superheroes and villains as The Tick did. Of course, The Tick was also originally a comic parodying comics, while the Powerpuff Girls started as a cartoon parodying cartoons. So this is the one episode that really goes after comic book tropes specifically, and it's hilarious. These guys might have loved their cartoon references, but they seem to have known their comics too. The Powerpuff Girls decide they're not as cool as the heroes they're reading in comics because they don't have gadgets or vehicles or angst, so they spend a lot of time getting all that stuff, and it prevents them from getting to a giant monster in time that's destroying the city. He shows up 3 days in a row, and they aren't able to fight him until the third day because Bubbles is too slow on her pogo stick, Blossom gets stuck in traffic in her Liberty Mobile, and Buttercup made a deal with the devil to get a Spawn costume, and she can only fight at night. Bubbles calls herself Harmony Bunny, and she's based on cute manga comics. Blossom is Liberty Bell, and she's basically Wonder Woman. And my favorite is Buttercup is Mange, a Spawn knockoff. What's kind of neat is that they're knockoffs of other knockoffs, so two clever versions of each character type they want a parody has to be included. The Spawn-esque comic Buttercup reads is, instead of Todd McFarlane's Spawn, Old McDonald's Spore. I never caught that until this viewing, and I'm still laughing about it. There's also a melodramatic newspaper strip the professor is reading in the newspaper, and it's by Stan He and Larry Huber. It's made for comic aficionados, but there's plenty here for those who aren't, and as I mentioned earlier, the best part is how it ends, where we finally get the rite of passage explanation for why all these monsters are terrorizing Townsville. Oh, and the monster is named Steve, and he sounds like a regular guy who works at a cubicle somewhere. He gives the girls the moral of the story, and when they realize they're great heroes because they don't need the extra stuff the comic heroes have, they kick his butt, and the day, of course, is saved. That's also pretty good commentary about the impracticality of a lot of superhero gimmicks. Sure, some gadgets and such look great on the page, but it wouldn't necessarily be functional or helpful in reality. Number 4. The Powerpuff Girls rule. Who knew after the show was off for 4 years that Craig McCracken would bring his team back together for the 10th anniversary of Powerpuff Girls and make one last episode, which would turn out to be one of the funniest and most entertaining shows they ever did. This may seem pretty high on the list, especially since I've included nothing from the last 3 seasons, but come on, it's hard to beat all the main villains drag racing against the girls in go-karts, and the girls' cart shooting out a green turtle shell Mario Kart style, or Mojo Jojo singing Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And the premise is one of the most ridiculous and awesome concepts in the show. There's a key to the world, and the law is that whoever has it rules the world. It's sent around the world periodically, and now it's been sent to Townsville. And I love how Blossom takes care of the elephant in the room. How have we never heard about this thing before now? She says, we always knew about the key, but we never thought anyone would be dumb enough to send it here. All the major characters return for a fair amount of screen time or cameos, and quite a few minor characters too, as everyone, including the Powerpuff Girls, greedily try to grab the key to the world. It's the perfect gimmick to do a farewell episode. And finally, after lots and lots of hijinks and puns, Mojo gets his hands on the key, and a little earlier he says, the world would have ruled if I were in charge, but now you'll never know. And guess what? When he does rule, it is awesome. He turns Townsville into a perfect utopia. He cures all disease, stops all crime, and even does what Bubbles wanted if she ruled. Free puppies for everyone. But as I said earlier, Mojo loves being a villain too much, gets bored with world peace, and starts firing ray guns at everything. The only way this could possibly have ended. I should also mention that the animation is quite a bit different from a lot of the series. It's more detailed and there's more three-dimensional depth to the landscapes, like in the movie, though some of the later episodes were doing some of that also after the movie was released, and I'm glad they started incorporating that because it looks really great. It really showcases everything that was fun about the show, and I'm glad it got made for the anniversary. It was aired in 2009 on Cartoon Network, and you can see it on the Season 6 DVD in the series box set. It's in the special features. Number 3, Uh-Oh, Dynamo. This one came before Powerpuff, and it's a somewhat similar premise, but I included both because Dynamo includes the longest, most elaborate, and most fun monster fight in the whole series, and also, in my opinion, the best monster. It's a giant fish balloon, as Blossom calls it, that can puff itself up really huge and shoot spikes out from all over its body. At the beginning of the show, a smaller version comes up on land while the professor and the girls are out at the beach, and it's easily beaten because it's so small. But hysterically, the professor freaks out because he thinks the fight was so scary, so he builds a giant mech robot and insists the girls use it in battle so they'll be safer. They roll their eyes and say they don't need it, but they promise because he's their dad. I guess I'm just a sucker for that dynamic in this show. There's a fun montage sequence where each day of the week passes and they beat an easy foe without the Dynamo, while the professor keeps telling them they need to use it. And the one for Friday is a joke that made me totally lose it the first time I saw it. Mojo Jojo's new greatest plan ever to defeat the Powerpuff Girls. He just waves a big stick at them. Ironically, the big version of the easiest monster to beat ever seems invulnerable, so they use the Dynamo, and we get a great homage to Japanese monster movies, including a kung fu showdown where the monster uses an Amtrak train as nunchucks. They finally manage to punch a hole in it and deflate it, but only after they've unnecessarily destroyed the whole city because the mech is so huge. This show and Dexter sure love their giant mech spoofs. You also gotta love the Dynamo's random victory dance it does in the middle of the rubble it caused. Number 2, Meet the Beatles. You can already tell from the design of him that Craig McCracken loves the Beatles, but never in a million years would I have expected a whole tribute episode. I might have thought this one would be a full 22-minute show, but it's more impressive as a shorter cartoon because of the sheer number of references it pulls off, with a pretty clever plot to hold the whole thing together. I mean, anyone can take something they love and throw a million references to it in a show, but the reason this one is so impressive is because while everyone has Beatles song lyrics in their dialogue and police are even led by Sergeant Pepper, it still feels like a real episode of the Powerpuff Girls with events that would totally happen in that show. It might have been one of the better episodes with the same basic plot even without the Beatles slant because there aren't a lot of big villain team-up episodes, and it certainly doesn't just rely on references. At one point, Mojo says, "Just because I'm a monkey does not make me a banana addict." So, four of the biggest villains, Mojo, Princess, him, and Fuzzy, form a conglomerate to take over Townsville when they defeat the Powerpuff Girls at their home, having all conveniently chosen the same time to attack them. Him wants to call them the Silver Beatles, but Mojo says that's too fancy, so they call themselves simply the Beatles. Naturally, Mojo and him are Lennon and McCartney. The history of the Beatles is mirrored in the Beatles' short stint, where they stay at the top of the criminal game as the Powerpuff Girls can't defeat them all together until they're broken up by Mojo's inclusion of Mojo Jojo. She's a performance criminal with a lot of bizarre ideas that Mojo thinks are innovative, but none of them really work, like stealing nothing but white things because it's all right because they're all white. The group leaves Mojo, and that gives the girls an opening to defeat them all. And we find at the end that the girls borrowed Jojo from the zoo and used her to bring the Beatles down. I'm glad that ultimately the heroes of the show are responsible for taking the villains down. And her real name is Michelle. Someday Monkey won't play a piano song. Genius. I think my favorite lyrical reference is when the professor says, "Mojo Jojo was a man who thought he was a loner, but he's just getting by with a little help from his friends." A lot of lyrics from different songs are strung together like that. It's impressive how unforced a lot of it is. When it is a little forced, the script knows it and makes fun of that. It's remarkable parody writing, and of course even more enjoyable for the most diehard of Beatles fans. And number one, Los Dos Mojos. There's only one thing funnier than Mojo Jojo, and that's Bubbles as Mojo Jojo. And I'll go on record to say Bubbles is hands down my favorite Powerpuff Girl. She gets all the best lines, so how can I not put this at number one? Here she gets clocked on the head by an I-beam in a construction site after the girls try to hit Mojo with their I-beams. Yep, they went there. And when she wakes up, she thinks she's Mojo, so she kicks the real Mojo out of his observatory and steals his Robo Jojo. And everything that happens after that is a laugh riot. Bubbles' Mojo cackle is hysterical every time, and this is the first episode that really rakes Mojo over the coals for the way he talks, restating and reiterating everything over and over again. When Blossom and Buttercup call her Bubbles, she says, "I am not Bubbles! Bubbles is not my name! For the name Bubbles is not the correct name to address me by, because it is not my name!" And that just keeps going and going. Ultimately, it's Mojo who knocks Bubbles' personality back into her because even he can't stand her constant circular dialogue, and then he closes out the episode by doing the same thing in one of his best monologues, where he says there can only be one Mojo Jojo. 2 is too many, and 3 is right out. And another great gag is when Bubbles' Mojo says, "It's time to meet your maker," and the other girls say in unison, "You keep the professor out of this." I think it's the most quotable episode of the show, and out of all of them, it's the one I'm most likely to never get tired of seeing again. Well, there you have it. And once again, the movie is reviewed. Or, the top 10 list is completed, thanks to Captain Logan and the Powerpuff Girls.
Welcome